I'm here for my second episode of How She Led to Me with the amazing, I'm here with the amazing Ali Vitali of MS Now, and also she wrote an incredible book that I love, Electable, about how why we haven't had a woman president. And, I love the little ellipse there. And, we will one day. Um,
Nick's doing the work.
And she has been up for a long time because your show Way Too Early, starts at 5 a.m.
5 a.m.
So, but I'm really grateful to you. And we met, I've known you for a while, but we met at Mount Vernon in person. And my husband really enjoyed working with you back in the day.
Power duo.
Yeah. So, but you're doing great things. And I know you're the senior correspondent on Capitol Hill. And I wanted to talk to you about the woman in your life who has inspired you most. And I'm sure there's a long list, but I think you gave it some thought. And I think that one thing about you that I'm really interested in is you're 10 years younger than me. I looked this up and I cried myself to sleep.
You look the same age though, and that's what's important. So good on you.
Yeah, okay, good. And just I think your generation is a little like willing to take up space a little bit more and not ask for forgiveness as much, instead of starting sentences off with "I'm sorry," but I don't see that as much from women in their 30s. So I guess if you could talk quickly, or as long as you would like, about the woman in your life who has given you that confidence to do all the amazing things you've done.
Certainly given me the confidence. I also just love this idea because the thing that I realized when I was writing my book, and it seems like you had the same realization, is that all of the women who we are interested in, who are game changing, who are movers and shakers, are people who are actively looking at the path that their brick being put in the road helps to make for the next person. Certainly I saw it when women were running for various offices, but especially the presidency. But then also, they are forced to think about who are the people that put the bricks in the road that they are walking on. And so when I thought about mine, I've got so many bricks in my road, but the first brick was very much laid by the women who were around me in my house. And I was really lucky to live in a multi-generational house of women. We're Italian. This is a very Italian thing. My mom's parents came up and lived with us in Westchester from the time that I was 8, but even earlier, because they were commuting from the Bronx to come be with us a few days out of the week so that both of my parents, who were lawyers in Manhattan, could commute in, and their childcare situation was taken care of by the fact that we were lucky enough to have our grandparents live close enough to us.
Amazing.
And so for me, I got to grow up with my mom, certainly as an amazing role model of a professional woman. But then also I was able to grow up with my grandmother, who would have been that except for the moment in time that she was placed in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading the story that you were telling about your own brick in your road, right? And this is just true, I think, for women in the, 50s, 60s, 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for my grandmother, who had to graduate high school at 16 because her dad basically left her family and she had to help her mom by going to work and starting to bring home money to support their family. I mean, she is always someone who said to my mom, you have to get an education. You have to keep pushing yourself. Like, to them, kids in the Bronx who then brought up their own kids in the Bronx, like the way out was educate your way out. And to me, that was always like the central focus was like, if I can get smart enough, if I can work hard enough, I can do whatever the next thing is. And, I think the thing that she instilled in me, and this was always a compliment, she thought I was the smartest, the prettiest, the best, but like any instance where like reality didn't bear that out, she was like, you can work harder. You are always the hardest worker. And, she coupled that with like, I'm not a math person. People who watch me on TV will hear me say, like, I don't do math. That's why I got into journalism.
Me too.
But she, I mean, for all of us,
Yeah.
she would like in 3rd grade or whenever you start doing multiplication tables, I have like this vivid memory of her, our bathtub was oriented next to a toilet, and she would just like sit on the closed lid and drill me on my multiplication tables while like also giving me a bath. And to me, it was like, okay, multitasking and committing to helping someone overcome something that they're not immediately great at. And, just the love and care and attention that she always gave me just like filled my cup every day growing up, that you're like, okay, now you're in a field that can be often unforgiving and difficult. And like, you have to draw on that foundational support. And like, for me, it really all comes from her.
Oh, is she still with us?
No, she passed away my senior year of high school. And it was like at such an inflection point moment, right? Like, you're going off to college, you want that person who has always been your protector. However, I think the best gift was, and my sister knows this now, my grandmother, in addition to being all of the amazing things, was also a snack connoisseur. And we had in our house growing up both like the main snack closet, which we called the domain, and the domain was constantly stocked Oreos, Gushers, like millennial snacks. Well, like, what was your go-to millennial snack?
Probably. Well, I didn't like. I'm 45, so I'm the oldest millennial that ever existed.
Still a
Probably.
millennial.
I'm the technically not, but I loved those little 100 grand bars. I don't even
Oh
know
my
if they
God.
still make those.
We had those in the house. So like this sort of thing. The domain was peak. Like, you knew it was operating at its best level when it was like Dunkaroos, fruit by the foot.
Yes.
Yeah. So like
Yes.
we had the domain, but then she had like the secondary domain because they lived in the apartment that was like in our redone basement. We were so lucky.
Yeah.
And she had these Godiva, like raspberry filled chocolate squares that were like the peak, the creme de la creme. And my sister would come down, my younger sister would come down and like take them all. And so my grandmother used to hide a stash just for me. And after she died, I remember finding like the last stash of like the raspberry Godiva. And it's like, okay, like even in debt, like I think I like put them in my bag, packed them for college. You know what I mean? Like they were like the consummate snack.
I love that. I love that. What was her name? What's her name?
Josephine.
Josephine.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's who I oddly enough dedicated the book to.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I love like it's the little things, right? Like you're remembering things that are pretty small, but they're so significant in your life, and how she must have been. I mean, did she get to see you? Yes, she didn't get to see
No.
you reach these peaks
Mm-mm.
at all.
Well, I have a belief, to the extent that I am faithful. I think everyone's sort of like watching everything, right? So
Yeah.
like there is something beautiful about that. And you have to believe, right, that like all of the things that we are doing now are being celebrated in heaven or above in the beyond or whatever it is, right? So I think there's something so beautiful about that that I think about every time I sit down and try to metabolize what this current generation of women is doing and like what the next generation might do. I think there's something so special of like carrying on the legacy that is both very public, but then also like my private family legacy as well.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because you mentioned for me, I wanted to do this podcast because my mom, Valerie, her father didn't want her to go to college. I mean, he just said,
Yeah.
what's the point? And I think that there is, and then she worked her way into Berkeley. And I think it's the kind of the women, as you said, who put those building blocks in place. And like you said, my parents, I mean, both of them always say, you're the best, you're amazing. It's like building up that self-confidence. And when you know that even you are not the best, you're not going to be the prettiest, you're not going to be the smartest, you're not going to be, I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
But you can always work harder. Right. And I think that's
always work harder. I mean, and I'll say a lot about myself. Like it is hard to outwork me to the point where like, I often joke, like I do my show, I go to the Hill. I'm constantly curious about everything that's even outside of those beats. Yeah. And I joke with people, I'm like, I have a sickness, but like, I mean, like you've been in these spaces. Like if you're not in it for the love of the game, you're not going to be able to do the sheer hours and like doggedness that it takes.
Totally. And are you, I did want to ask you, because I think Electable is such a great book. And I think that the women that you've covered are so fascinating, and you covered all the most interesting elections, really, 2016,
Yeah.
2020, 2024. When you look at these women, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, do you see like is there a commonality about them? Is there something that's given them the self-confidence to take up space in this man's world, which is presidential politics?
I mean, look, they all talk about the ways that their own upbringing shaped them, right? Like
Yeah.
for Kamala Harris, her mom is such a central piece of her narrative. For Senator
Mhm.
Warren, I mean, I heard her talk about the ways that watching her family struggle with money against a system that just didn't quite seem to fit with a family who was trying to work and make it happen, but like it just the system didn't help them. And there's a part of it where of course, most women reach for their mothers as like their mentor figures or the person who shaped them, good, bad, otherwise, right? In this instance, to the better. But then there's also the ways that you can't help but notice that the way that female politicians are sometimes encouraged to tell their stories fits in a very simple box. And I think this is one of the things that I grapple with in Electable and that I regularly think of now even in the context of this conversation around, okay, progressive candidates and pushing the envelope and the mold, like most of them, the leaders of those movements are men because we just allow them to present in a slightly different way, right?
Mhm.
Mamdani jumping in a pool in a suit is like, oh my God, that's wild. But like
Yeah.
women jump in pools all the time. And also there's a question of like, what can they wear? And like, will it look
Mhm.
cool or cringe? And like, I just think the allowances that we make for women are
Yes,
just smaller.
of course.
And one of my favorite smart people who I talk to a lot about this idea of like authenticity and how much is allowed in the political space is Maya Rupert, who also wrote a great book and has worked in presidential politics and beyond for a long time. And I think the thing that we question as we look at this growing field of would-be 2028ers is like, okay, as you are asked to go on the podcast circuit and engage with the manosphere, like candidates have to do that. And also, how much allowance are we making for women to authentically do that when, to come back to a point, Senator Warren couldn't even talk about like her favorite kind of beer on an Instagram live or whatever it was at the beginning of the 2020 cycle.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I even felt that way. Um, I was a White House reporter at Bloomberg and for Obama's first term, and there was kind of a feeling of like if you joined the I can't even think of what the name is, where you're betting on things like football games and things
Oh
on.
yeah, like a DraftKings or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like and you could do that with friends, and like it was a way to get in with the men who are really running the show.
Yep.
And I had friends, women reporters who were really good at it, and I just wasn't because like I'm not into football and I can't think of my favorite team. And so I think that there is like a way that women are kept out. Some women are kept out from that top tier. Do you feel like are there personal experiences that you have having covered those elections, covering the Hill, where you reach back to your grandma and you think, like, what would she do in this instance? Like, if someone's shutting you down when you're asking a question, what would Josephine tell you, right?
Oh my God. I mean, look, she was the embodiment of the phrase a tough cookie. And
Yeah.
like, it's a perfect phrase because you are tough and sweet, right? And like, I think that is something I come back to a lot. Like, I am not by nature someone who is like mean. And I think politics right now has such a meanness to it that, I sort of refuse to let the atmosphere set my humanity for me. Like, certainly that was something that she instilled in me too. Like, we are our own people and we have, the moral and ethical code that we were brought up with. And I try to keep that as a North Star. But I think the thing, like, and I write about this in the book too, like the thing she would be tickled by that I actually think is like a somewhat like weird example of like the ways that we are sometimes gate kept from candidates. It's DraftKings. It's also like, I ran into the first time I ever met then Senator Harris was in a bathroom. Like, and
Yeah.
we were at the Columbia airport and, I'm coming out and I'm washing my hands and I'm, taking my makeup off at the sink. And she comes out and she's washing her hands and we end up bonding over like what makeup is best taken off by like what makeup wipe. And I remember leaving that encounter and being like, have my male counterparts just been running into candidates in the bathroom for years? Like, and like, it's
Yes,
not like some profound exchange is
yes,
happening in the bathroom, but like, you know this, you're not
totally.
building relationships based on like every exchange being a profound exchange. It's like,
Yeah,
hey, do you have an extra makeup wipe? Right? Like, and this is the currency of our business is like, having proximity to people who
totally.
we understand the kinds of things that they're interested in, and we can help explain when they misspeak or have something different that they've said on a campaign trail or in the Senate. Like, this is our currency. And so
Yeah.
those kinds of run-ins just like
Oh, I
help you
love
understand the full person. And I just remember walking away being like, is this just like what men have always had,
that.
running into
Yes.
candidates in the bathroom, which like I don't want, but like is interesting.
I love that. I mean, that's golf, right? That's like the
That's
little,
all.
like, the small, or running into, like, I mean, anybody could do this, but I remember Obama would run on the treadmill a lot, and people would see him at the gym at, like, the Quality Inn in Iowa.
Yep.
And, like, when you have that small interaction of, "Hey," and then maybe he'll recognize you the next time
Yes.
and ask you that you can get that question. Do you feel like because you're younger that there is a sense that when you're asking questions and you're a younger woman, um, has it changed in the last few years where in the Trump presidency, is it harder, to get the respect that you deserve? Or do you think it's just always been this rough and tumble? Politics has always been tough. It is harder now than ever
I
before, I would
think
imagine.
I think it has always been this rough and tumble. And also, the president has a consistent tendency to name call and lash out at female reporters, largely female reporters of color, in a way that I think you've always seen candidates get frustrated when they don't like questions. But the name calling and I would say, kindergarten characteristics of it are new. And I think have been called out consistently, but it doesn't change the behavior, right?
Right.
And so you sort of have to hold space for two things at once, that like it is a thing that everyone agrees is ridiculous and we are calling it that, and also it's not going to change the behavior itself. The ways in which I think it has gotten better, though, in like the daily grind of you are part of a scrum that rushes toward one singular candidate. And again, I come back to Senator Warren because she was the first and probably only candidate I know who like actually was thinking about the dynamics of the scrum,
Wow.
in part because she asked me once, why do all of you come so close when really if everyone just took a step back, everyone would have a little more space? And I said, wow, you have a plan for the gaggle. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, no one really trusts that, their shot isn't going to get messed up or whatever. And sure enough, at the next rally, she taped down, or a staffer rather, had taped down a U for all of us to stand on. And I always noticed that in the instances where in a spin room where the scrums are not just, your regular press corps and everyone sort of knows that they're going to get a question, so you're less shouting over each other because you only have a minute. I remember viscerally a local reporter physically put his microphone and shoulder over my face.
My God.
And I think we were in Vegas. I have an amazing picture of it. I'll send it to you. It's crazy. It kind of looks like a Renaissance painting, but like modern era. And the senator just says to this man, like, I'm actually in the middle of answering Allie's question, but I will come to you next.
Love that.
And I had never seen a candidate like disrupt something that is just, I think, so taken as commonplace, which is women just getting talked over
Totally.
whenever a man decides that they're done speaking or he's done hearing from her. And certainly, like, I would have gotten back with my question after he got his question answered, right? But
Yeah.
to have, I think, more women in these spaces where they can disrupt that in real time was, I think, like quite validating, actually.
100%. I love that because that's also a seemingly small thing,
Yes.
but it's a really big thing because the whole
Correct.
point that you're making is you're rushing to her because you know that a bunch of other people are going to do it. You'd be fine holding back,
Yep.
but you're not going to get your question asked. And I think that there's a certain aggressiveness about journalism
Yeah.
that is a sort of male kind of, but it is one of the few spaces where women do, there are so many amazing female journalists out there. Is there one that you look at and you think, not to put you on the spot here, but is there a woman who is on the scene now or who was when you were growing up? I mean, I think of Barbara Walters and like watching her interviews that were so emotionally like resonant, you know? Was
Yeah.
there anybody who you really look up to particularly?
I am a Connie Chung girly.
Oh, yes.
Also her memoir, like,
Oh,
reignited that for me. I read it whenever
yeah,
it came out. Time's kind of a flat circle 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
yeah,
It was amazing, and I think she does such a good job in such an evocative way of placing herself at the middle of these exact scenarios that we're talking about. I had to run to the front of the scrum, and people said that I was elbowing, but, like, men were elbowing, and, she does such a great job of spotlighting her career, which was storied and amazing and inspiring, but then also showing that at each time she stepped forward, there was someone there to kind of jab her back
yeah,
and be like, "Oh, we didn't like the way you did that." And it's like, "Well, I did it the way that the men did." And she talks about specifically trying to do things in the way that the men around her were doing. Be boisterous, don't police conversations, right?
yeah,
And even still, she got the jab. And so I read that and it just completely reignited my love of her career and her tenacity. Um, and so she's one that, like, stands out to me, but, like, how lucky was I that I got to work at NBC alongside someone like Andrea Mitchell, right? Who's a
yeah,
contemporary right along in that same vein, and I think, we talk about, even the 10-year difference that you and I have, some of the differences that might be, and I wish I were the person who didn't start sentences with, "Sorry, but," I strategize in my head all the time. I'm in constant negotiation with myself. Wish that I weren't, but I think, I've also given myself the forgiveness that, like, maybe that's just kinda how I am now. Um, but, like, I have gotten clearer and more declarative in my sentences. I've gotten slightly more used to asking for the things that I need. And I mean, to even think, like, in our 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 40 years stretching back, like, that's not that much time. And
yeah,
most of our touchstones in our profession are women that are still working
yeah,
and still, like, around and writing their memoirs. And, like, it's not that much time that's elapsed, but thankfully, I think our progress is evident, and, you know, that comes out in the coverage too. Like,
yeah,
I don't mean to keep coming back to the book, but there's a great study that showed, like, the bias that comes just innately, subconsciously, of male reporters reaching for male sources and experts.
mm,
And the gender
mm,
bias that just kind of comes into play, and how when more women started becoming reporters and more
mhm,
people from diverse backgrounds started becoming reporters, you got coverage that just felt a bit more reflective. And I think it's become evident in the way that we cover politics, not just in the 2020 presidential primary, but then I covered Nikki Haley in 2024. And I
mm,
felt that the coverage was reflective of the background that she brought to the table. And there were a lot of sexist jabs thrown her way
yeah,
throughout that primary. And she was the last woman standing. And we've seen women be the last people to hold Trump accountable, whether it's Liz Cheney and the January 6th committee or Nikki Haley just trying to offer a different vision, and so many women in between, right? um, that I thought we were able to metabolize that well because we had not just me, but other women
yeah.
in that press corps.
Well, and I think I worked on this book with Nora O'Donnell, and she did that amazing
Yeah.
interview with Trump, where, to your point, he said, you're not a nice person. I mean, the word is always nasty for women, right? And she just kept going, which I thought was great, and not letting the personal attacks like get in the way of asking the question. I think Kristen Welker did such an amazing job with Trump
Oh,
too.
also, the absolute opposite of whatever the opposite of nasty is like who those two people
Yes,
are
they're
specifically.
so I know, and
Right?
they lift other women up too, and that is what when you were talking about Connie Chung, I read that book too because I'm fascinated by her.
Yeah.
Um, she does talk about, like, the idea that there wasn't a lot of space, and so Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer and, like, those kind the infighting that was going on, that she kind of watched it and got in the middle of it, and I think sometimes is your sense that women sometimes, especially of that generation, this is a generation like 30, 40 years
Yeah.
removed, felt like they couldn't support each other because there was such limited space at the table. And then when younger women come up,
Yeah.
they're like, look, I had to work so hard to get here. I'm not making any special dispensations for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a
And
very real thing.
but it's not even like special dispensations. It's
Yeah,
sort of like the acknowledgement that like there doesn't just have to be one of us. And I
I know.
think that is something that only starts really getting embedded in people's minds when you start seeing that there isn't just one of us. I mean,
Yeah.
I just think about the ways that Mika Brzezinski reached back for me at
Mm,
various points when I started guest anchoring, giving me tips on like, read a teleprompter this way, or have you tried it this way, or, whatever. And like, she's an example too of someone that cuts across that, right? Like, we now have, again, when you talk about the span of 15 years, 20 years, right? Like, we now have people at the top of their games who are willing to say from the top, I don't want to pull the ladder up. I want to pull the ladder down and help you figure out the best way to climb it. Right. And I think
mhm.
when you start seeing that set up for you when you are in your 30s, like
Yeah.
you then get to look and turn around and say, okay, like as I am on my climb, who can I bring
Yeah.
up? And it's the same as when we talk about a candidate pipeline. It's the same pipeline that we should talk about in newsrooms, in history, severely male dominated fields still, but like we can sort of breed this collective mindset that like there doesn't just have to be one person who looks like us, sounds like us, has our lived experience. Like there's a lot of different ways to be
Yes.
female in a newsroom, in history, in politics, right? Like, and every perspective can be valued. And I think I've been lucky to see it modeled for me from the time that I was 6 to the time that I am 36 now. And I think that's a really great thing. And there are dark times and progress is certainly not linear and it doesn't go up like this. And that's so frustrating and annoying. But like, I am someone who chooses to focus on the yet in the subtitle, right?
Yes, I love that yet.
Really
Yeah,
just, I feel like we have to choose optimism and we have to like, you know, manifest it a little bit to sound a bit woo woo, but like, I think,
totally.
I think that's part of the game,
And
right?
you think in our lifetime, this will happen.
I mean, it has to because I'm choosing that. But also, like,
Yeah.
this is probably the least satisfying, but also one of the more apt things in the book of like why haven't we had a female president is like there's just not that many presidential elections,
Yeah.
like, and there's
Right.
just not that many presidential elections after women got the right to vote, let alone run. And you don't have the first like serious candidate on the ballot until 1972, right? With Shirley
Oh,
Chisholm, and like there's women who ran before, but like they were largely mocked, and like she
Barbara
was,
Lockwood. Yeah, I mean, there were women Nora and I would when we were researching our book, we would be like, "I didn't know this." There is a woman, Mary Catherine Goddard, whose name is on the Declaration of Independence.
yep.
We aren't taught this in school. That's why history is so important.
But John Hancock really took up the space.
He did. He made sure that no one else was getting any love.
There was no, sorry, do you want me to move my quill? Just
Typical man, typical man.
he must
Um,
be nice. He must be nice.
I do want to ask you, would your grandmother have called herself a feminist? Because I think that's like such a loaded term
Yep.
and it's changed a lot over the years. Being a feminist to me has always meant you believe in equal rights for men and women. I mean, I went to Barnard, I am like a card carrying feminist. But I think to earlier generations, it was like, oh, you were like a bra burning, kind of like you thought women were better than men. I don't know, but the term is so loaded. What would your grandmother, who's like an older, from an older generation, Italian American, right, have
Mhm.
said about that word, do you think?
I do not think she would have called herself that, but she was
Yeah.
the embodiment of it. But also, it took me a long time after college for sure, and a few years at that to be like, "Am I a feminist?" Like,
Really?
because the label felt like, and this is such a female response, like, I hadn't done the scholarship around it. Like, I
Oh my
couldn't be
God.
I haven't done the research. And, like, Roxane Gay's Bad Feminist actually really
Oh,
helped me
such a
sort of
great
make peace with the fact that, like, I and most humans have, like, a complex idea that doesn't fit just into one box, and I think the definition of feminism as it comes into this modern wave has also changed and become a bit less rigid.
book. Mhm.
Um, But no, I don't think that she would have called herself that. But I also think that if she were here now to have grappled with it and like watched me kind of go through my own evolution, even around the word, like I think that I think she'd come around to it, but I don't think it would be a knee jerk posture for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's very
I
common.
don't know. What do you think your mom would do?
I don't thi oh, my mom would definitely say that she was a feminist, but she was going to Berkeley in the
Ah,
'60s, so that was a different thing. But my grandmother would not, because I do think that there was that, like you said, it's
yeah,
generationally, 10 we're talking about such small periods of time. Like in
I
the
know.
1970s, women had to get men to co-sign, like, so they could get a credit card.
Yeah.
And my mom worked at Bloomingdale's, and she would tell stories about, she had a job and she wasn't in the credit department at Bloomingdale's. And like these women would have to come in to apply with their husbands to get a Bloomingdale's card. And it's like, we take this for granted. And there have been, and I think that was the challenge for me, and I'm sure for you in writing your book too, because I would guess Biden was in the White House then, but
Mhm.
women, it's like one step forward, two steps back. It's like this slow progression. We saw the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which kind of, it's been hard to talk about women's progress in a time when it feels like we've gone backwards too.
And when women are still just sort of like an open political debate, like it's not a settled right. And I think the thing that I hear consistently is that grandmothers now and mothers now look at the generations after them and they say, I feel like you have less rights, less options, less choices. And I don't just mean that in a reproductive healthcare sense than I did. But if you even come back to the economics of it, right? Because really it all is in a capitalist society, like we're talking economics and
Yeah.
women's ability to work for themselves, support for themselves. Like if you look at the 1973 Roe decision, you actually started seeing women once they could like have a little bit more control over when they had children, you started seeing them rise in the workforce more. And so, I am always one to say abortion and reproductive care is an economic issue at its core. And I think very much still is. And so, yeah, you're right. Like the idea that like issues that innately and specifically cut towards women are still up for debate, like
Yes.
it just is, it's different. I mean, it just shows there's work to be done.
Totally. And one final question I have for you, because you've studied this so much, is do you think that we'll have a Republican woman president before we have a Democratic woman president? Because some people, I think, Hillary Clinton or someone like that has said that.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, to me, there is this sense that women in the Republican Party are supported in a kind of a different way. It's a bizarre thing because you wouldn't think it to be true,
yeah,
but that this might be the case that I don't wanna say any names because it's kind of terrifying, but the choices that I can think of, but, like, there's this sense that women in there's a circular firing squad going
yeah.
on in Democratic politics.
And that's also just like democratic politics to a
I
certain
know.
extent too, right? Like Republicans, once they've decided on someone, like it's decided, it's
Yes.
anointed, we are rallying. Democrats, like they are constantly having the family debate at Thanksgiving. And there's something healthy about both routes, right? And I
Yeah.
think both sides are frustrated with the other for getting to do the thing that they feel they don't get enough of. I will say what I found in the book, and Secretary Clinton also said that to me. Like the last chapter is her basically saying, "Yeah, in my lifetime, I hope we get one, but also I recognize that history tells us that typically conservative women tend to notch this goalpost in history first. So like it's
Mhm.
possible." I think the other piece of it too, and there's limited studies on this, but the one that I found in my book that I keep kind of coming back to and probably should go back and unpack a little bit further as we get into 2027 is this idea that for Republican women, the
Mhm.
litmus tests are just different. Like voters on the conservative side do not want you to talk about how you are an historic first and you are intersectional and you're feminine. Like it's not, those are the litmus tests that turn them off. It is an ideological test. And for women, there's a study that shows similarly for candidates of color in Republican circles that like you have to sort of almost pass the purity test ideologically of like, I am a woman, but I am super strict on reproductive health care because I'm in line with the Republican Party goals, or, I am a candidate of color, but I'm going to speak out against affirmative action, right? Like there are these like litmus tests that once you pass, like the threshold is clear. You are supported then. And I think it allows for a little bit more like purity of debate. That's not to say still that when I was covering Haley, I didn't hear the same kinds of things about like, I don't know if a woman can win. I did. And that's, I think, where gender becomes this overarching thing regardless of party, but it is adjudicated and dealt with differently. And so, sure, like I think rational minded people all think that it could happen for a Republican woman first. But I mean, that just sort of then dips us into this present moment where like MAGA is so intertwined with masculinity and like macho. And Trump has like created it that way. And that I think brings in a whole new set of dynamics. Like I have in my office this list of, people who might run for president, and I'm kind of looking up at it right now. And I look at people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and I'm like, well, she is in because Trump has designated her as like in and acceptable. And she was his spokesperson for so long, right? So like that's an interesting name that we might get to track depending on what her plans are. Nikki Haley, she's not going to run, right? So like it's an interesting, we'll get to keep testing this, but like, I think anything's possible, right?
And she has a bunch of kids because I have some kids myself, and I would see her at like at birthday zone and these kid parks and stuff. And you're seeing this, it's kind of cool to see a woman at that point. She worked in the White House and you knew she was going places. She's very personable, very smart.
Political dynasty, gets this stuff. Yeah.
So you're right. I think she has major potential. Well, I'm so glad that we could talk, and I'm glad we could talk about Nona.
I mean, I had a Nona, but this is not the official Nona. We had two. She was Grammy.
Okay, your Grammy with the stacked snack cabinet.
Stacked snacks cabinet. My goodness. Josephine Delfino, she really just killed the snack game.
I just love that she also left the little Godiva for you to find.
Yeah. It was beautiful. And now every time I buy them, that's like if I see them and I'm traveling on the campaign trail, I'm like, right there.
Well, I'm sure she would be so proud of you and what you've accomplished. I just love that you are you exude self-confidence and also like love of the game. Like you love politics.
Love of the game. I mean,
And I think in a feminine way, like you brought some Taylor Swift into it, and I love it.
See, like I have a gift from my wonderful friend Jen Psaki, like just the absolute peak. Yeah, we're doing women contain multitudes.
100%. And Jen is another example of an awesome woman who, like in the White House, was so smart, so not condescending in the way that some men can be.
Yeah.
And I just remember because I was covering economics, and she just, her brain power is incredible. So, and math is not my thing either. So
no, well, we're gonna leave the math to anybody else.
Let's just forget about
But you and I can do this whenever you want. I love it.
Well, I love talking to you. Thank you so much, Allie. And
absolutely.
Would love to do this again. Yeah, we have to think of another woman for you to talk about.
Another woman, or we can just like talk about the women when they run for president.
Oh my God.
It's not the point of this podcast, but we can still.
All right. Get some sleep.
Thank you. I'm going to bed.
All right. Bye.